I'm Samir Allen, and welcome to my home. Dear Gemmayze Street, I want to tell you how you came to be. It has been a long journey, and we will get to the food, but the story doesn't begin with the food. The story begins with who I am. I am a Lebanese New Zealander. Well, actually, I'm a Lebanese Pākehā New Zealander. My people came here 130 years ago from a small village called Bashadli. My mother's people came to New Zealand and entered a hostile environment. Where my family lived in Dunedin over a century ago was known as the Devil's Half Acre, and they were seen by white New Zealanders to be inferior. Member of Parliament William Pember-Reeves said, giving his opinion on Lebanese immigrants in 1895, "They do not lead sanitary lives, they are not moral people, they are not a highly civilized people, and in no sense are they a desirable people." As a reaction to this attitude, the Lebanese community turned it on its head and started to create the same image of the Anglais or Europeans in their mind. Although that environment was not my experience, the hostility they entered is part of my history, and I know it through word of mouth and being passed down to me through the generations. I have struggled with my identity quite a lot in my life as a result of this attitude towards Anglais. I never wanted to be seen as a half Anglais, half Lebanese kid. The only way I knew was the Lebanese way. As I got older, I realized that there are two very different cultural systems and cultural ways of being and ways of doing things that make me who I am. On the one hand, I come from a very collectivist, family-orientated culture with an extended family. On the other hand, my father's family are very nuclear, very individualist. My father's side, well, I don't know as much about them. I do know I have Irish ancestry. So here I am, a Lebanese Pākehā New Zealander. Most of my life I spent with my Lebanese side in Dunedin. My Lebanese family name is Fari. Our real name is Fakhri. But as with most immigrants, my family did what it could to fit in with the dominant culture, so we anglicised our name. My mother called me Samir because she has always retained a very strong connection to her culture and to her sense of who she is. And she really instilled this feeling in my brother Nat and I. But basically how I learned about my culture was growing up in my mother's family. My memories of that were a very strong sense of tribalism and family. We were always together and lots of us were together. We ate a lot because Lebanese gather around food and food is very important to our culture. My Nana and Jiddi were like my parents and they instilled in me a great sense of who I am. I knew I was Lebanese and was proud of that fact. Jiddi taught me many life lessons and showed me that nothing is more important than doing all the good you can for those less fortunate than yourself. Always think of the person behind you, he would say as we were driving, and while he was talking about the traffic lights, he used this idea in every aspect of his life, and that is something I have always carried with me. My Nana and Jiddi taught me hospitality from a very young age. There was no one who was not welcome in my Nana's house. Anyone who showed up was treated as a welcome guest. And this is how I saw my culture, of one of warmth, love and compassion. My Nana and my great auntie Margaret lived across the road from each other on Elva Street, which for me was the hub of my Lebanese childhood. They would always argue over who was going to have the azimi, or feast, next. We were always at either house for dinner, where we would sit around food and lots of food, old and young sitting together and enjoying it together. But I suppose when I really became interested in food was the first time I saw my great auntie Pamela, who was one of the first Pākehā in my mother's family, and who was taught how to cook Lebanese food by my great-grandmother, who was the matriarch. And Auntie Pam eventually became one of the best cooks in the family. I remember I was sitting in her kitchen, I must have been 7 or 8, and I saw her breaking down the chicken and marinating it in lemon, garlic and olive oil, and pouring the stock over the rice to cook it up. Up until this moment, it was a dish that only just appeared on the dinner table, which I had eaten. I now realized it was a process. So I started to watch more closely and really start to learn from all the people in my family, my Nana, my aunties, my Jiddi, and start to learn how to create these dishes that I only knew as my favorite things to eat, but were now becoming things I could create myself. I had a real passion about food, and I knew I wanted to be a chef. So after school, I went to AUT and did a diploma in culinary arts, which led me to fine dining Western-style French food. And so I managed to get a job at the Grove, which was an amazing experience for me, because all of a sudden I was not in a Lebanese kitchen anymore. I was in a Western-orientated kitchen and learning different processes and different ways of cooking and presenting food. And although that kitchen was totally different, I fit into that kitchen. I could be a part of that kitchen. And then I would go home to a different kitchen and a different kind of process. And at some point, I felt there was a way of pulling this together. But this was bigger than the food. This was about who I was. It was almost like my identity came out in the food. I also worked at Baduzi, where I started to think what this might look like in a Lebanese sense. If you use some of these processes or these processes. But it wasn't a fully formulated idea at this point. Then I got an opportunity to travel to Lebanon with my uncle, my auntie, and my brother. So I went over in 2014. And I saw so many things I could relate to in Lebanon. I saw my family in Lebanon. The land understood a part of me in Lebanon. I am no more Lebanese than I am Pakeha, but I was always immersed in Lebanese culture. So somehow when I got to Lebanon, I felt there was a side of me I could relate to. But I was also different to Lebanese people. Of course, I hadn't lived there and I couldn't speak the language. But I'd heard about Lebanon all my life and had sat around tables where people would talk about Lebanon and talk about being Lebanese. So it became quite a mystical place in my head. And I heard about this village, Basharri, and I wanted to go there and find out what it would be like. Would I fit in? Would I feel at home? And in many ways I did feel at home, and in many ways I felt like an outsider. Once my auntie and uncle left, I had the opportunity to experience some restaurants and work in them. So I worked for my cousin, and that was an amazing experience. I really started to experience some food that I had never seen in my family. But then of course I left Lebanon with a bit of a heavy heart because I did fall in love with this country. But I was also leaving to travel the world for a year, so not so bad. Over that year I was slowly formulating you in my head. And you are about food, and you are about hospitality, and about your decor and your atmosphere. You are about the whole thing we've put together. But it's also a lot about me and who I am. And you have really helped me find out who I am more and more, because you are a combination of my Lebanese and Pakeha food styles and flavors. And that comes together through me, and it comes together through you. So often people will come in and ask if this is a real Lebanese restaurant. Lebanese people will come in and say, my mother makes this better. And while I was not always so much interested in being authentic, I was more interested in my family, my history, and who I am, and how that would come together, and that is what you are. My hope is that people don't just enjoy the food. Of course I want people to enjoy everything here, but I want them to leave feeling as though they have tried something that is not completely Lebanese and not completely Pakeha, but somehow a bit of a mix of this. And I guess that's the story of me and my family, but it is also the story of many other people who have come to Aotearoa. And what comes together at Gemmayze Street is all those different cultural traditions, all those different histories that make me up. And that's really what I'm trying to achieve with you. Just to be who I am and present food that represents really my identity in some ways. And I hope people will enjoy it, but that people will also go away and some of their thinking will be challenged. So what just happened? Was it Lebanese? Was it New Zealand? Was it both? So Lebanese food can be like this. Also Lebanese people make wine. All these different things that happen when you're at Gemmayze Street that challenge people's thinking, and hopefully people will think outside the box about Middle Eastern culture. Because often we are put in boxes. And so people can come in expecting one thing, a bit like people only see conflict or terrorist attacks or refugees when they hear about the Middle East. But when you come to Gemmayze Street, you are seeing a totally different conception of the Middle East. And they are seeing something that disrupts their thinking about what Lebanese food can be. So I'm hoping that you are going to challenge their thinking not only about the food, but also about the Middle East.